137 News Radio 700 WLW. Welcome back. I am Ken Broo. Valentine's Day is Friday, and your partner could be cheating on you. Got a new study in my hot little hands here that more than half, actually 57% of millennials, that would be the group ages 25 to 37, more than half admit to having committed financial infidelity. Gen-Xers about 45%, 37% of baby boomers. And more than a quarter of the survey respondents, this was done by, I think, bankrate.com or creditcard.com. That's what it was. More than a quarter of those surveyed say that financial infidelity is worse than physical infidelity. Oh, really? Somebody who knows all about this is joining us next. She's a relationship expert. She is Christi Carter, the executive director of an organization called Relationships First. And they hold workshops all over the world to share hidden secrets. And they can take you from conflict to connection, just like that. Although, we'll see. Standing by, as I said, on the AcuteHearingCenters.com hotline is Christi Carter. And Christi, good afternoon, and how are you on this glorious Saturday?
Hey, I'm wonderful. How are you?
Oh,
thank you for having me.
Just delightful. It's Valentine's Day on Friday. I'm very excited about this.
Season.
Do you have a Valentine, Christi?
I do.
Okay, good. I was just in case. You know, I could do my best Chuck Woolery here and try and see if we can do something with listeners. But if you're set, you're set. Now, what do you make of this whole thing about financial infidelity? It seems to be running rampant. It used to be sex, 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 sex. Now it's money, 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 money. Is this a real problem or just some manufactured problem?
You know, three things that couples fight about. It's money, sex, and kids. And there's studies show over time that, and like you were noting on the surveys, that millennials now are hiding their spending more than ever. But people have been doing this for my parents, for instance. Growing up, my dad had a little section in his wallet where he called it his mad money. And that was like his little secret stash. And my mom always told me, to hide money in case you need it. So this is something that's been inbred in us, but it really tells me that there's a bigger problem. It tells me that couples aren't communicating.
So I was
reading a study.
I was going to say it's a trust factor, I think, and I've always said that unless there's trust in a relationship, that the relationship is going nowhere. So it's almost as if you're stashing a little, it's just, I'm not going to tell her. Well, then why would she trust you then? You don't trust her. Why would she trust you, right?
Yeah. I was reading something in a study, and it says that couples make these purchases and they stash their cash because they're fearful. They're fearful of the fight. They're trying to avoid a fight. So they do this long-term concealing and having this alternate life. Or the second other reason is control. They are trying to regain some sort of control because we do know lots of studies and history out there that women have historically been controlled with money. I remember my girlfriend telling me her mother wasn't even allowed to have a credit card, and never was able to sign a check. So there's been a trend. But what we also learn is that when you're concealing debt, sometimes they're concealing debt, sometimes it's they're spending, covering up bad habits.
Sure.
But
sure.
It does, yeah.
And I see here, and I suppose I shouldn't be surprised by this. Maybe it's a generational thing or what, but it says here 38% of men say they spent more money than their partner would like, and only 31% of women. My guess is if this survey was done 40 years ago, that male number would be much higher and the female number would be much lower. But because of the workforce now, It doesn't seem like there's that much. Well, there isn't. There's only a 7% disparity in that. So I guess that's a sign of the times as well, right?
Yeah, I think the dual income has empowered each person to feel like they are entitled, and I think that people want control of their lives, but the root of the problem is they can't sit down and talk about shared goals, common interests.
Yeah.
If they were able to look at where they want to focus together and where they want to grow together.
Yes, and therein it goes back to I said trust, and now you're saying what you mentioned just a few minutes ago, communication. So the trust and then communication. Well, if you don't have trust and you don't communicate, what are you doing with each other, right?
That's right. You have to have safety in relationships. We believe that safety leads to connecting. So you can't communicate unless you feel safe.
Well, I think what might be in play here too, and I don't know. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but when you talk about the age group we're talking about, millennials, 25 to 37, most of that age group is waiting later to get married. Most of that age group, and I know these are generalizations, but most of that age group come into a lasting relationship, marriage or otherwise, by and large, financially independent, and so they're used to having their own way. They're used to having their own money. They're used to having their own lifestyles, and so there probably is a little more protectiveness of their money and their lifestyles than it would have been, for example, the baby boomers, where you might have the man who was more financially sound, and as opposed to the woman who was not so much because of the times and because of the mores and because of employment at that time. So I think probably, again, we shouldn't be surprised by this because of where millennials are right now.
Not surprised at all. In fact, it shows it. When you were talking about the times, I think that also baby boomers got married younger, right? So they were able to build it together. Millennials are waiting longer, so not only do they have their own financial independence, and they're older and they're more set in their ways. Yeah. Sorry, millennials, old dog, new tricks, right?
Right, exactly. So what advice would you give people, Christi, if this is a problem, and it obviously is a problem for a lot of us. I thought the other statistic that jumped out at me from this was that 81% of the people that were surveyed say they would be upset if they found out their partner was financially cheating on them, but would stay in the relationship. So it may not be devastating to a relationship. It probably would hurt. But if it's going on, and you can, I think when you're doing something like this, you pretty much know it's a problem. But if it's going on, what advice would you give to couples as we head into Valentine's Day, where there should be a renewed interest and commitment to love? What advice would you give?
I would say slow down, have a conversation, remove negativity and judgment, the contempt, the criticism. That is the number one cause of divorce. There was a John Gottman study just done. So if you can create a space that's safe to have a conversation without contempt and try to understand rather than to be understood.
Well, that's what I've been all my life, Christi. This may come as a shock to you, but I'm someone who wants to be understanding and not understood. Because if I'm someone that wanted to be understood, this whole town here in Cincinnati would probably be walking around in a daze when it comes to me. How do people can get a hold of you at relationshipsfirst.org? Is that right? Because you're all about healing and sharing truths and trying to keep people together, not apart. Am I right there? Relationshipsfirst.org.
That's right, relationshipsfirst.org. It's founded by two of the top relationship scientists in the world, and they've had 40 years in couples therapy and theory, and we just teach a structured dialogue process, and it works for couples, it works for parents and kids, coworkers, corporate spaces for collaborative work environment, and it's the same process, just creating safety so people can have a talk.
Good luck with you and your Valentine next Friday. And Christi Carter, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Ken. Y'all have a good afternoon.
Well, we will, because we believe in communication here at the Big One. We believe that the number one thing that can keep people together is the spoken word. Completely unvarnished, with total honesty, and not coming into something where you want to be understood. Because let me tell you, ain't nobody on the air here that's completely understood. 147 News Radio 700 WLW.